Okay, I will get going. I want to be respectful of Jared's time. Um, so you guys, today and next week, I wanted to do a kind of a two-parter training on the home inspection process and beginning with the home inspection itself, what the inspection itself looks like, what buyers can expect. Um, I wanted to ask Jared from Right Angle Home Inspection to come on and be a guest speaker so that you guys can ask questions about the home inspection process. We've got a loose outline here. I do want to kind of make it a casual conversation though as well. But please feel free though to jump in at any time with a question. We don't need to make questions come in at the end. But the home inspection is the hardest part of a transaction after getting the offer itself accepted. It is always the most challenging hurdle. That's why I'm thankful it's the first one to get out of the way. Once you're through the home inspection, you pretty much know that you can almost rely on the fact that it'll be kind of smooth sailing from there. Again, please ask questions. Thank you again, Jared, for coming on. Jared works primarily in the North Shore, but that's where you're located. He'll go all over. So first, I'm just going to have Jared give a little bit of an introduction, and I'm going to stop the share and just have us go keep this casual.
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
I'm Jared. I'm with Right Angle Home Inspections. That's my company. I do have two other inspectors that work for me, Dave Baxter and another inspector named Jared, who just started last year. So you'll probably, if you call us, you'll see one of us around. And yep, we primarily work on the North Shore. That's where I live, but we will go as far west as Pewaukee, Oconomowoc, Lake Country, down south to Racine, Kenosha, and up to like Port Washington. If it's a really cool old house or something, we will go further than that, but that's kind of our area of expertise, those old houses along the North Shore. Yeah.
Awesome. Which then also makes working out in markets like Lake Country kind of a breeze for you guys, where, or not a breeze, but a little bit easier time, I think,
Right.
versus working on those old homes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not odd for us to be in a house from the 1800s, 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Like that's just normally what we see, these old homes over here, Tosa, Whitefish Bay, all those old neighborhoods.
Okay. So I wanted to just begin with like the home inspection process itself. Like once we have an accepted offer, buyer then schedules a home inspection with you. Do you, and this is kind of a funny question, do you have any preference on who is scheduling that home inspection with you? Do you like to make sure that people are calling you directly? Do you have an online system? Like, what are you seeing as far as like scheduling the inspection itself?
Sure. So especially nowadays, we see contingency deadlines, if you even get the inspection, very short. They used to be, 14 days, sometimes used to see 20 days. I don't typically see that too much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times people will go onto our website and just schedule right there at 2 a.m. as soon as they get their accepted offer or something. That's fine. Otherwise, you can shoot me a text, you can give me a call. It is helpful to talk physically sometimes, just because most people haven't gone through the inspection process before, and that's where we can kind of meet for the first time, answer any questions. I'm always the one that answers the phone. It's not an answering service. So if you have any questions about the process of the home specifically, we can kind of talk a little bit while we're scheduling the inspection.
Okay. And then what is typical cost for a home inspection?
Our inspections are based off of square footage, and they start at $395 for up to 1,500 square feet. So it really depends on the house. It goes up based if it's a duplex, it goes down if it's a condo. We give a pretty steep discount for a condo, just because there's a lot of areas we're not looking at that we would in a single family home.
Sure.
But if it's something like 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 square feet, It can get fairly expensive because it's a big property. You're usually dealing with multiple electrical panels, multiple furnaces, sometimes two different types of foundations, complicated roofs, but it
Mhm.
starts at $395.
Okay. Then can I ask for those of you guys who are on to just mute yourselves, please?
Oh man, I was kind of hoping for that one, and I said, "This is a fine." He's a fine one.
1 second here.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully when you start speaking again, Jared, your name will come up or your, okay. Oh, duplexes. Is there a higher cost involved with duplexes? Because
Yeah. There's a flat $100 surcharge for a duplex,
okay.
just because you're dealing with usually two furnaces, two water heaters, two panels, two kitchens, multiple bathrooms. So yes, there's an additional cost for a duplex.
Okay. So, agents, I usually like to say to my buyers, like when we're going through the buyer consultation, that a home inspection usually will cost, I'm going to adjust now based off of this information. I would always say $350 to $500. And it might be more appropriate now to say $400 to $600, depending.
Yeah, it really depends on the size of the house, because
Oh,
a 6,000 square foot house is very different than what I just did the other day, which is like an 1,100 square foot house.
right. But again, kind of back to that buyer consultation period, you guys, we want to like right size expectations with our buyers and making sure that they understand those costs involved. Okay. So now, once we have the home inspection scheduled, and I'm going to kind of like go into maybe a little bit too much detail. I'm going to get into the minutia here. I just want to make sure that agents understand, once you have that home inspection scheduled with the home inspector, whether you're scheduling it yourself with Jared or the home inspector or the buyer, is that the next step that we're doing is going straight to the listing agent and letting them know right away when the home inspection is. Typically these days, we're just scheduling those online through Showing Time, and there is an option to make an inspection timeline, so we can block off like 3 to 4 hours on Showing Time. So,
can I interrupt right there?
Yeah.
Can you put in? It would be really helpful if you did block off that 3 to 4 hour time period. In just the past couple of weeks, I've had agents block off 45 minutes.
Ooh.
And another one did an hour and a half. And then the seller came home during that time and was upset that we were still there and I wasn't even halfway through.
Sure.
And it was it made it a little awkward for me because the agent didn't show up anyways. So it was just me there, and I kind of got an earful when, the inspections do take 3.5 hours ish.
Yeah, see, so those details do matter, guys. Yeah, making sure then that the listing agent is communicating to the seller that they need at least 3 hours. And kind of back to your listing presentations then too, when you're presenting offers to your sellers, making sure that when you're going through the offer and when you get to the inspection period, that you are letting the seller understand, this process, again, Mr. Seller, takes 3 to 4 hours. So we do need that time, and the buyer is allowed that time to have the inspection. So.
Yep. And a lot of that time is dictated by the size of the property, first of all, but then who attends the inspection and how many questions they have. So some clients don't show up, and that makes the inspections go a lot faster. Some show up with their parents and their sisters and their kids, and they all have different questions. And that obviously adds length to the inspection. So keep that in mind too.
Good segue then to my next question. So the inspection itself and the structure of the inspection, you're meeting the buyers at the home and their entourage, so maybe there's parents, children. Do you have preferences on, well, why don't you just speak to the general structure of how you're operating during that time?
So we typically like to show up to the property a little bit early just to get a feel for the property, look at things that even if the buyer is present for, they're not really taking part in. Like if we're climbing onto a roof physically, nobody's following us up those ladders. So it's
Sure.
kind of nice to get a head start sometimes. But when we show up to a property, we'll start with the exterior first: roof, siding, any sort of garages, whether that's attached or detached. And when we go in the house, we start in the basement. So we start doing the foundation, the structure, heating, the cooling, plumbing, electrical, all that big ticket stuff that most people are the most worried about. We like to get that out of the way. One, to answer any questions and to help alleviate some stress. And
Mhm.
two, it's a long process and people's focus can wander. So tackling that big stuff right away really helps people stay kind of on message, looking for that big ticket stuff. And then after the basement, we work our way up all the way up to the attic. And who attends the inspection? It's really up to you. It's nice when there are fewer people there,
Okay.
just because you don't have a lot of people giving their input. Most people are, out there trying to do the best for, like, say, a first-time home buyer. Their parents come along. I know these parents are trying to, watch out for their kids or something like that. It's not always helpful because sometimes they'll start arguing with their parents, and their parents will be like arguing with me if they think they know better. It doesn't happen all the time, but it just adds a little bit more stress to the process when it's already super stressful.
Sure. So then do you have a preference, or inspectors, obviously you guys are going to vary, but like generally speaking, do you think it's best to just like, have one buyer in the same room with you, asking questions, as things come up? Are you, if you're noticing something and, you're taking notes on it, you're generally only going to call it out to their attention if you think it's something major at the time.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends a lot on the client. Some clients are very interested in the process and they do want to learn, and we really encourage those clients to follow us along and ask questions. That is helpful.
Good.
Just because if you have these questions, it's better to answer them on site than not answering them, than calling later or not quite getting the information you were looking for. So it is helpful to have them follow us around sometimes. If you're not super interested in the inspection and you're just kind of there to see the big ticket stuff, yeah, feel free to come. You don't have to follow us around. You can go measure your rooms that you need to, start laying out furniture, thinking about remodeling plans if you have to. And while we're there, if we see something big, we can give the client an update. It
Mhm.
really depends on the client, but if they want to follow us along and ask questions, that's great.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's really helpful for first-time home buyers, especially to be able
Especially.
to, they're using this as a way to learn about the home. And when I'm working with first-time home buyers, I'm definitely encouraging them to follow you around.
Yeah, we are too. Just because the reports have to be written a certain way, we have state standards, every inspector, for how they have to word some certain things in the report. And sometimes those can sound not necessarily alarming, but let's just say scary. And if the
Sure.
first-time home buyer is along on the inspection, hearing what's going on from us face to face, it helps the report seem a little more realistic, isn't the right word for it, but just manageable. Like everything can be fixed. Yeah, digestible, exactly.
100%. Yeah. There are so many times when, I've had buyers come back and say like things sounds way worse than they really are based off of the inspection. And not to minimize anything, you guys, either, but everything, they hear it in context, it does just make it that much easier to navigate and kind of determine what repairs they want to see fixed. So another thing I just thought of too is like, if you have that buyer who's not interested in following you around, one good question to propose to an inspector would be, why don't you find me when you know that a follow-up inspection is going to be needed, and that could be a trigger for when that inspector should definitely like find you in real time and talk about.
Yep, it's really client-based. I just had a client who's an investor with fairly deep pockets, and they're buying a big lake house, and he doesn't bother showing up. I've done inspections for him before. He doesn't bother showing up. We have a quick phone call afterwards, and that's all they need. But most first-time home buyers are not like that. They need a lot more information. So it is client dependent.
Yeah. So let's speak to, okay, so the end of the inspection, generally you're kind of giving a quick summary, right? Okay,
Yeah, so we'll give a summary. If the client's following along, we're talking the whole time and they're getting a summary as we go, but at the end, we do like to hit on the key points. And we're really there to focus on the big ticket items, is the roof, the foundation, structure, electrical, heating, cooling, plumbing. There's always going to be some small stuff, some loose doors, a window doesn't work, things like this. But that summary, we're really trying to be like, okay, these were the big things we found. You know, there's damage to the roof that could cause a leak, and the furnace hasn't been cleaned since the early 90s, and that really needs to be done so this unit doesn't have to be replaced.
mhm,
All the other details will be in the report, but this is the stuff that we think you should focus on. That's what that summary is for.
awesome. And then the structure, let's talk about the structure of the home inspection report itself.
Sure.
When can the buyer expect to receive it? And then, yeah, speak to how it's laid out.
Sure. So we have a 24-hour turnaround time. So after the inspection, you'll receive that report, you and the client, within 24 hours of completion of the inspection. Now, it was a year, maybe a year and a half ago, that the state implemented a law that says we have to have a summary at the beginning of our inspection report that hits on certain items. Each inspector and inspection company can still write whatever kind of format of report they want. So you'll see a bunch of different kinds, from people who handwrite them, people who mostly just use check boxes, or what we do, where we write things out in sentences and paragraphs that we think makes it more easily digestible. But the summary has to be there. And in the front of the report, we have to categorize things in 5 categories: defects, things to monitor, things that have to be further evaluated by a professional, maintenance items, and there's one other category there, things to monitor. So if it's like, no, this foundation wall looks okay, but keep an eye on it for the future, everything has to be in one of those 5 categories. So that's the big part of every report. Every report has to have that at the beginning.
Okay. Is there information? I mean, this is probably obvious, but there's going to be information in the report itself with more detailed comments.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So the summary is just, we color code our summary based on each one of these categories, give definitions of how things fit into that categories. But in the summary, there are no photos or diagrams. When you see that report or that comment later in the report, you'll see a little color code next to it to remind you which category it goes into. And then you'll also see any additional photos or diagrams that we include, which we usually include a lot of photos and diagrams to help people understand the report.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we as agents, you guys, we're going to receive a copy of that inspection report as well. And kind of and speaking to like process wise, once the buyer receives that home inspection report, typically you are being CC'd on that email because you're the buyer's agent. It's my practice to send that home inspection report right off to the seller and / listing agent right away. That way everyone has time to read it, understand it, ask questions. But even before we're identifying what issues the buyer might have, we just want to get that report off and say, you know, we'll follow up with next steps, Mr. Listing Agent. So, and Danny, I'll absolutely share Jared's contact information at the end of this. So.
Yeah, please do, because
Yeah.
if you're showing a house or you have a client who has a question, I'll put up my cell phone number too. Feel free to shoot me a text. Sometimes people will be like going through a showing and a client will ask a question like, oh, what's this? Or is that a problem? And it's something nobody's ever seen before. Take a picture of it, shoot me a text, and I'm happy to respond and help out.
Awesome. Okay, back to, well, we already we kind of addressed this, but I mean, we did address this, but as far as like home inspection etiquette, so again, it's okay for us to be in the same room as our inspectors. Again, it's all going to be client dependent. As agents, you know, some of us who are more experienced than others might need to refrain from giving too much opinion on things. We're really relying on asking questions of the inspector in real time once he's going over those major items with the buyer. So, you know, I think it's really important to help guide what questions a buyer might not know to ask, for sure. But make sure that we are asking the inspector and, you know, targeting those questions at the inspector so that he or she can be the one to answer them. So
That is helpful because, you know, a lot of clients do show up and they are interested, but they're already stressed out and nervous. Maybe they don't know about homes at all, which is totally fine. And they don't not necessarily know which questions to ask, but they're also afraid to ask questions. When we're face to face, they don't want to ask some questions. So it's helpful to have, we try and make everything kind of casual and low key. So we're really approachable. It's not a stiff process. I'm walking around with the clipboard making check marks or anything like that. It should be casual.
yeah.
You know, it's important. We're trying to find what's wrong with the house, but we can talk freely. That's what we're there for.
Awesome. And I did have a follow comment on that I'm completely escaping me. Oh, I know. Okay, so kind of back to our role agents in the home inspection process. And this is just a tip, I mean, or a huge encouragement for new agents to follow the inspector around. It's part of our job as training to like understand homes better. I mean, I've learned so much over the years about homes from following the inspector around and asking questions. And that will just help you that much more when you're showing homes to be able to identify potential material adverse facts, right? So it's just amazing how much you can absorb when you are, you know, when you're following the inspector around. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then on the same note, an extension of that, I highly encourage agents to reach out to our highly producing agents and offering to cover home inspections for them. You know, there are so many agents right now who just don't have the time or capacity to attend their home inspections. And this is an opportunity for you as well to make a little bit of money. And, you know, usually these agents are paying you to show up for them, but then also, again, to learn about the home inspection process. So, all right, I think this is a question that, you know, discussion that Jared, you and I both can have. So why should buyers opt to have an inspection even in a highly competitive market?
Yeah. I'm obviously extremely biased, but
Sure.
even if you're not using me, I think it's so important. Just because we encounter most home buyers who aren't familiar with homes. They don't know what to look for, what problems can arise, how expensive things can be to fix. And if you are going in blind and, you know, buying a large property and you don't know what's going on, it's very hard to plan for things that might be quite obvious to an inspector that you're going to need to plan for in the very near future, or
Mhm.
things that can just come up. I guess it depends how comfortable you are with risk, but it's a pretty risky thing to waive that home inspection.
Yeah, 100%. I just came from a presentation with one of our WRA attorneys. We are seeing, obviously, you know, we've been talking about this over the course of 2 years, more and more home inspections are being waived in this highly competitive market. And I do think that this is something that we can talk more in detail next week as well. But there is language that we can use to be able to have that buyer have the opportunity to have a home inspection still and still be competitive in this market. You know, we're kind of getting outside of Jared's territory here, but just insofar as like, you know, if we can maybe make a guarantee that the buyer won't ask for any repairs up to a certain amount, you know, that we won't serve a notice of defects on any repairs up to a certain amount, you know, that we'll let those things go. There are ways, again, that I just want to make sure that you guys are coming to us to get that language or talk through those things when preparing to write an offer for your buyers. So kind of scary out there. The WRA attorney made comments about they're just waiting for the shoe to drop on litigation after all of these home inspections have been waived, right? And what buyers are going to start to learn about their homes, and you know, the high costs, the potentially high costs involved of things that they could have learned at the home inspection period. So let's get into those major defects then. You know, let's talk about, you know, the most costly items. Let's talk about safety issues, the process when you are, you know, going through and seeing something that could potentially be a big issue. What's your next step with the buyer from there?
Sure. So the term defect, at least up until like a year ago, was not defined for home inspectors. It was kind of up to the home inspectors' kind of discretion for what they thought was a defect. And it still is up to us what we think is a defect at that time. But now there's an actual definition that we have to have in our report and use in our report. And I can read it for you. It's
Perfect.
I guess they were trying to be as clear as they could, but it still is, you know, one of those legal sentences that people come up with. It isn't the clearest all the time. So the definition now is a condition of any component of an improvement that a home inspector determines on the basis of the home inspector's judgment on the day of an inspection that would significantly impair the health or safety of occupants of a property, or that, if not repaired, removed, or replaced, would significantly shorten or adversely affect the expected normal life of the component of the improvement. So defects can come in really a wide range of categories. There could be two defects in the report, and one is a roof replacement and the other one is a $10 fix. So if you have like an outlet that has these little test buttons on them, you'll see them in kitchens and bathrooms a lot, called GFCI outlet. That's a safety feature that should be around any wet areas. Sometimes if those buttons are not exercised, they can lock up and fail. So if that safety feature is not working the way it should, that's a defect. That outlet is like under $20 and it's 5 minutes to replace. A roof that is 10 years past its expiration date and it's leaking everywhere is also a defect. Those two are very different things. So just seeing a defect isn't an alarm that it's going to be expensive. Just know that it's important to do.
Thank you for pointing that out. Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about that example of a roof then. If you are noticing signs of leaking, what is the next communication to the buyer on that?
Yeah, so we're generalists as home inspectors, and not just me, it's home inspectors everywhere. This is a state standard we have to abide by, and it's a national standard too. We can't give quotes on anything, tell you how to fix something, tell you that you have to fix it before you buy this house, nothing like that. So what we do is we're just making notes of the condition of the property and then telling you to follow up with the appropriate specialist. So if we see a roof that's leaking or has issues, we simply tell the client, you have to talk to a roofer to find out the extent of the damage, because of a lot of it's hidden, how much it's going to cost to repair, if they can repair it, if it needs a roof replacement. So the recommendation in the report is always to speak to that specialist, which I understand isn't the most helpful sometimes, because sometimes you have to talk to a lot of specialists. It's just one of our limitations as home inspectors. We can't tell you this needs to be done, this is the only thing that's going on, this is the exact dollar amount it's going to cost. We can't give that information. So it's talk to the specialist.
So, you know, as an extension of that, you guys, when follow-up inspections are recommended in our general home inspection report, there is language in the offer to purchase that gives us the opportunity to have those follow-up inspections freely. So if Jared recommends a follow-up inspection on a roof, per the contract, the buyer has that opportunity to do that. And have that roofer out. So it also means that once the seller learns that, they have their opportunity to have a roofer out as well, to figure out what's going on. And, you know, there might be a discrepancy on what they think the issues are, but, you know, as buyer's agents, especially, it's our part of our due diligence to schedule those follow-up home inspections. and to figure out the dollar amounts of these things for our buyers and to help them. You might, after having a discussion with your buyer, the buyer might say that they are comfortable with moving forward without having that follow-up inspection, without understanding the full scope of work, of course. I do suggest, having those conversations written down in an email somewhere, but obviously that's not always happening. But then this is just another like checkpoint for you guys too, as buyers, as buyers agents, as agents, start stockpiling your go-to contractors. And that's something that you will, that takes, sometimes years to just start accumulating. But get to know a roofer, get to know a plumber, get to know a foundation person, company, so that when you are there in real time with your buyer and the home inspector, and he suggests a follow-up inspection, you can call that contractor in real time and get that follow-up home inspection scheduled. Because again, we're working against a clock here, a deadline, and we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get those numbers and those scope of works for our buyers. And again, I think, no matter what comes of it, and we're going to talk more about how we negotiate these things next week. But at the end of the day, even if nothing comes of it, if a seller says no to this hypothetical roof replacement, at least the buyer has a full going into this closing eyes wide open and understands what's going on with the house. So, there are no questions after closing. They knew, I've got a $10,000 roof that I need a budget for. So.
Yeah. And I know it may seem like it sometimes. We really try not to put something in the report that says follow up with a specialist, in the summary that this needs further evaluation, unless we honestly believe that it needs that. I know sometimes it can seem like we're just saying, oh, call a foundation specialist, call an HVAC guy, a plumber, an electrician, and a roofer. And it's like, sure. Okay, what are you really doing here? Sometimes a house needs that, but we really are not just trying to cover our own liability. We really are trying to help the client and only putting that stuff in there if we believe they need to do it because we can't determine the full extent of this information, or that it really does need to be looked at. During the off season when it's slower for us, which is typically winter, we'll shadow foundation specialists, roofers, electricians, mold specialists, pest specialists, plumbers. We've been on site with all of these people as they do their work, learning from them personally. So we like to have this extra information so we know, oh, you're right, this does require some further evaluation. So we really, I know it doesn't always seem like it, we're really are trying to look out for the client, not just ourselves.
Thank you for that. That's amazing that you guys do that.
Yeah, we have the off time and most contractors are happy to do it. And now we have some go-tos that if we have questions, we can shoot them a text with a photo. I have a plumber that's fantastic, and I can shoot her a photo whenever I want to her cell phone, and she'll let me know what's going on. Now, we don't give these people out as referrals. We want to be completely independent, so it's not like we're trying to drum up business for our buddies. So we don't give any names out. So the agents will have to make their own list of contractors, like you were just saying.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. I think we covered the remaining questions. And actually I personally did not know this, that your hands are tied in giving estimates on how much things might cost.
Can't do it. Not only, so like some inspectors will do it, and for really general things, we'll do it too. It won't be in the report, but we can voice those things. So, okay, that GFCI outlet with the test buttons, the buttons don't work. Okay, I've replaced dozens of those. I know what the cost of that outlet is. An electrician's going to charge more for their time and everything like that. But I can tell you, oh, this isn't like some giant problem as long as there aren't other electrical issues. We'll let you know that this is fairly inexpensive. But as far as giving quotes, estimates saying, is this more than 5,000, under 10,000? Home inspectors legally can't do any of that. So I'm even going outside of what we should be doing by saying an outlet's cheap to repair.
Mhm.
We're really not even supposed to do anything with quotes or prices. We're not
Okay.
contractors. When you open the outlet up, you might notice other issues. When
Right.
you start tearing shingles off, you might notice, oh, there's structure stuff under here too that we
Mhm.
wouldn't have been able to see. So we are really tied with giving any sort of estimates, even
Okay.
ballparks.
In ballparks, yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. I thought I knew everything there was to know about home inspections, and I
Well,
so
a
that's
lot of
good.
inspectors, and we do sometimes too, will give ballparks if we
Okay.
know that. Somebody asked how much a water heater costs to replace, and my brother-in-law had just had that exact one replaced like 2 weeks before, so I could kind of give him a ballpark of what it was going to be. But we're not supposed to do any of that.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna open it up to questions, you guys. Let's
Yeah.
see. Um,
Are we able to chime in? You said.
yes,
vocal-
please. I want to like
Okay.
try and get this to gallery view.
Especially as a new agent, what are things, so obviously we're there at the inspection with you. What are things that you don't like, absolutely like, you don't want an agent saying key things because that you see are almost like habitual?
It happens rarely, but it does happen. Agent, like I've said something to a client and an agent will be like, oh, that's not really a problem. Don't worry about it. When it very clearly is a problem. So if you don't know, it's not always super helpful to chime in. It doesn't happen very often. I feel like it doesn't happen much anymore. I don't know if just the agents I work with now or something like that. But when the agents start contradicting the inspector, it can be, the client loses trust in both of you then because they don't know who's right. So it's not always helpful to do that. If you have a question with something I'm saying, please bring it up to me, just maybe not in front of the client, and we can talk about it. I'm happy to do that. I'm not going to take it as like you're attacking me and everything I know. I don't believe that. So if you have a question, just let me know. Otherwise, we don't look at like cosmetic things. So sometimes agents
Yeah.
will ask about that, and we just don't care about cosmetic things.
Thank you for pointing that out. I forgot to comment on that. Yeah, we're looking at major structural safety.
Major
Yeah.
stuff. Yep. We're going to put there's a loose doorknob in the report probably, but that's not why we're there. We're not there looking at that kind of stuff.
Any other questions, you guys?
Anything.
I have a question. This might be a little off the wall, but I met with a seller recently whose house has like a solar panel apparatus on the side of the home.
Mhm.
And yeah, it apparently was used back in the day to kind of help with air heat or
Yes.
heating of air and
Yeah.
home. You're familiar with that system?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We see a couple of those every year. Like the big black panels that are on the side of the
Yeah.
house.
All of, yep, on one side.
But they don't
um,
look like solar panels. They just look like these black rectangles.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are
Yep.
cool.
Do you just curious to know if you guys kind of can evaluate that for functionality? And
We've never been able to operate one. So everyone that we've seen is just basically art at this point. None of them that we've seen have ever been used.
okay,
If there's some sort of fan system they have, yeah, we can try and operate it. But those specialty things are usually outside of the scope of our inspections. So solar panels, looking at septic tanks, looking inside of a well system, those are specialist systems.
okay,
But sometimes you can see those panels, they're all damaged or they're causing siding damage. We'll make notes of that kind of stuff.
okay. Have you ever had anyone ask if it's recommended to remove it?
Oh yeah, almost everybody asks that because they're not in use and they're like, I don't want somebody thinking this is something else. I don't know what's going on here. It makes it harder to do siding repairs. Yeah, most people want to remove them. I think they're kind of cool, but.
Okay. And the other question I had was, when you guys are performing a pre-listing inspection, is there any differences in what types of things you must disclose? Like, do you have to call out defects if it's pre-listing versus a buyer inspection?
Yeah, our reports legally have to be the same. If it's if it's called an inspection report, we have to follow certain guidelines. So a pre-listing inspection, a buyer, a post-sale, which we've done a ton of this past year, where after
Okay.
closing, we're doing the inspection. Yeah, we still have to call everything the same.
So then my question then goes to Stephanie. Our disclosure types of responsibilities with that. Say the seller has the inspection prior to signing the listing contract and they do get those things mitigated. Are those things that have to be disclosed to all parties in a transaction? Or if it's mitigated, does it mean it's no longer considered a defect?
Yeah, that's kind of entering into how to fill out the real estate condition report territory, which,
Mhm.
there's different opinions on that. Is it when the seller is filling out the condition report at the time and he's already gotten something fixed, is it still considered a defect? My stance is that disclose, disclose, disclose. I'm just going to give a personal example. When I sold my house, I had a 1890s River West bungalow, and I had lots of issues with it, and I stated the issues and how I fixed them. So, but another thing that you can do too is just provide the inspection report, and it can be stated how things were fixed too. So
You
I
would
don't wanna-
provide,
a lot of times, what's most common, if there's going to be a pre-listing inspection report done, that pre-listing inspection report is going to be provided in MLS.
okay, I was gonna ask that. You would include that in the MLS with like a statement from the seller as to what they've already resolved.
That would all still be encompassed in the real estate condition report.
Okay,
So an agent might, a seller might just say, please see attached inspection report on their real estate condition report. So they can just like directly reference that, and then,
Mhm.
versus like taking all of the information and transferring it to the real estate condition report. Again, though, those are all questions to be answered by an attorney.
okay.
So,
I know it's not my place. Can I chime in on that question?
sure.
So sometimes we'll do an inspection and we'll show up and they'll have like a pre-listing inspection on the kitchen table, like the seller will, and be like, hey, we fixed these things. And when I see those, like, then the client who I'm working with will say like, hey, were these things really fixed? And I can go through and be like, yep. Man, it really makes that buyer feel good seeing that stuff was disclosed and actually repaired. This is way out of my territory, but I like seeing it too. I just like having history of stuff that's been done. So I just like knowing what was repaired and when, because if I see something like, say I'm in a basement, I'm looking up at the subfloor and I see water stains around a toilet and I'm testing them and they're dry, they're probably old. But if I knew there was a leak and it was fixed, I could see that, yes, they are dry. It is not leaking. That stain definitely is old. That helps me too.
Excellent. Hey, have you ever come across like some of those disclosed items that they say were mitigated and you found in your inspection that it wasn't done well?
About 80% of the time.
Okay.
That
And how
doesn't,
did,
I know that seems like an exaggeration, but I'd say 50% of the time, the things that were mitigated were never touched in my experience.
oh, wow. So they
Yeah.
would still come up on your report?
Oh, absolutely.
as a
Yep.
defect
So
or something?
whatever I
Okay.
see in a pre-listing report, it really doesn't matter to me if the report was there or not. I'm still giving the same information I would if I was ignorant of what was going on.
Okay,
Somebody being like, no, they're going to fix that next week. You don't have to put that in the report. Doesn't matter to me. It's going in the report no matter what, because that's what I see at that time.
Mhm.
Or
Okay.
a client be like, oh, don't write up this bathroom. We're tearing it out anyways. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm still putting everything in my report.
Awesome. That's really good.
awesome. Thank you, guys.
Bridget, in answer to your question, no, licensed agents may or may not be present at a inspection, but it is not required. So
I don't know if this is, you can do this, but sometimes I'll get codes to access a property if an agent can't be there. I don't know if you're supposed to be doing that.
we would be getting permission from, yeah. the listing agent. But that being said, it's recommended to have a licensed agent. We, as a company, recommend that licensed agents be present.
Yeah, we actually like that a lot of the times, because I was like testing a garage door one time, and you're supposed to put your arm under it to see if the garage door, when it's closing, it's supposed to hit an obstruction in reverse. So we put our arm under there and test it. And I put my arm under that, and I'm not some big bulky bodybuilder, but I just touched that door and the whole thing just crumpled because the door was already broken. And the agent was standing next to me who could vouch for me, being like, no, they didn't do anything crazy. This door was broken. It's not their
Yeah.
fault. And that was like super helpful, because it was just me. I mean, I know how I would react. Like, how can I trust you? This door's broken. What'd you do to this thing?
Right.
So it's nice to have somebody on site sometimes.
I've also had an inspector drop his ladder
Yeah,
on the roof,
yeah,
like a super blustery, windy day. And so I had to like somehow pick it up for him.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just nice to have somebody else there. We got
Yeah.
accused one time of moving this big like armoire in a kitchen with all these china plates in it. We got accused of sliding it across the floor to check one outlet, and it scratched the floor. And it's like, we would have never done that. And the agent was like, no, we didn't move this during the inspection. And that really
Yeah.
saved us.
Yeah. Okay. See, yeah, this is all good. I'm so glad for these questions.
I feel like,
Just,
I feel like maybe this is because like I'm such a newer agent and maybe super inexperienced or not as busy. But I feel like it almost provides a sense of like, I got your back and loyalty to your client when you do go to those, because it's like you're interested in what's actually happening, even though you're not the one doing it, but you're showing that like you're there to make sure that you see everything that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way, and it's reassuring, because clients will have questions for me that are really realtor questions that I can't answer. Like, well, should we ask them to fix this? I can't tell you what should happen there. And then your agent's there to help answer that question. So
Right.
I think that's helpful.
All excellent points. Yeah. And Danny, back to your point too, is just like, kind of in the vein of like business building and reputation, and, it's going to make it that much more likely for that buyer to recommend you. Danny was there like every step of the way,
Right.
so the likelihood of your name getting recommended to another potential client is that much higher, so it's all about educating ourselves and showing up for our people.
And I think, like I was saying before, when the report reads one way and what we say on site might be slightly different, it helps as the agents there to see it too, because they're the one that has to negotiate on these topics. So if
Mhm.
they're there getting the word from us and then reading the report, they kind of get the full picture.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I like forming a relationship with the agents too. So if you ever have a question about something, you can comfortably call me or shoot me a text, and I'm not a stranger.
Yeah. This was a really awesome conversation. So thank you again, Jared.
No, thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
Anybody else have a question?
Okay, maybe a silly one, sorry.
No silly questions.
I always have so
No.
many. So as a listing agent, say we don't have a signed listing agreement yet with the customer. Is it, and we've recommended a pre-listing inspection, is it okay for us to accompany the seller, even though we don't have a signed agreement yet?
On a home inspection?
Yeah, for a pre-listing.
Yeah. I mean, I would be, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Wow. I've never had an agent attend a pre-list.
Yeah. Usually they're not.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it. I'm just
Have you
it.
had sellers asking questions about what they should and shouldn't fix based off of your findings for a pre-listing?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
That happens. Especially in my experience, I can find first-time home buyers getting really focused on a bunch of small items that every house is going to have. So when I do pre-lists, it's nice to see the sellers taking care of those small items that can bog first-time home buyers down, that are,
Mhm.
you can spend a weekend and clean up 10 or 15 of these small items. And I think that really helps it go smoother later in the transaction.
Yeah.
I might be speaking out of turn, but I just see so many first-time home buyers during the inspection get really caught up in the small details.
No, that's excellent perspective. Thank you.
Okay, so next week then, the second part of this is we're gonna go over the process of negotiating the inspection. So that includes, walking our buyers through the conversations around the repairs that they want to see addressed. The process of follow-up inspections, will deeper dive into that as well. We're really going to talk about how the best way to write up those inspection amendments, and then best practice around notice of defects. So it will be really important for you guys to come back next week. So I know it's the Monday following Easter, but I hope you guys can all come. So
Yeah. And
okay,
please,
and
if you see something weird in a house or something, take a picture and send it to me if you have a question. I just had somebody send this photo. I don't know if it's going to show up on my phone very well. See this in a floor?
yes, oh my God.
That was in a super old house in Waukesha. And it's actually a way to turn their sewer system off and disconnect it from the drain, because that part of the city used to flood really bad and get sewage backups. You could take this big handle and turn your sewage off so you won't get a sewage backup.
Oh
It's
my
like, I haven't
God.
seen one of those in years. So when they sent me this photo, I was super excited. So don't ever feel like you're bothering me. I love this stuff.
Yeah. Jared is really good about geeking out about this stuff.
Yeah,
So
too much sometimes. I just like it so much. It's so interesting.
he's very knowledgeable. So
Yeah, anything.
okay, you guys, thank you so much and
Yeah.
have a great week. Thank you again,
You-
Jared.
Thanks, guys. Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you,
awesome.
Jared.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely.